all right, yeah, here we are. It is time for the weekly download. Oh yeah, it's weekly download time. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the weekly download. It's been a couple weeks, but I did a bunch of weekly downloads in a row before I left for this trip to make sure that there was lots going on. But yeah, I'm here in Hawaii now. It's beautiful. It's amazing. I'm here for a little bit, so I'm going to be doing some work here and some teaching here. But yeah, I'm in Hawaii on my way to set up the new Producer Dojo headquarters in Los Angeles. Really, really excited. I got a great new building that we're going to set it all up in. But yeah, so here we are, and I was going through the other day, I was going through a bunch of submissions for the new mixtape, and I noticed that like a lot of people have trouble getting their mixes bright without kind of making everything all blown out and distorted and shitty sounding. So I'm going to show you a really cool technique that can help you to get your mixes sounding better. So here, let's just make sure, yeah, audio levels look good. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to show you how to make what's called an exciter. And an exciter is a really, really cool technique where you're basically, you use it to brighten up and like shine up sounds in the mix. And it used to be like when exciters first came out, you couldn't even buy them. You would have to pay their studio technician to come in, set up the exciter, put the magic touch on your mix, and then pack up the box and take it away. But you know, there's a bunch of different kinds of exciters on the market, and they all basically do the same thing. And what they're doing is they're isolating the high end in. Actually, let's make sure there's not too much wind on the mic. Oh no, it seems pretty good. Okay, so what an exciter is doing is it's isolating the high end and just applying saturation selectively to the high end. Now you can do this in line. Like if I wanted to just take the drums on this track and apply an exciter to just the drums, you know, you can buy all these different third-party exciter plugins and stuff. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you how to make your own exciter. So I'll show you first how to do it as an insert, and then I'll show you. Or actually, no, I'll show you a send first. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new return track. And this return track is going to be our exciter, and we're going to use this to send a little bit from each channel that we want to brighten, and it's going to brighten them and kind of brighten them together and add a lot of glue and cohesion to the mix. Okay, so an exciter, basically the first thing we need to do is isolate just the highs. So I'm going to put an EQ on, and this is one time when you want to use oversampling on the EQ, because like basically the maximum frequency that Ableton can produce is half of the sample rate. So that's how you get like 41 sample rate. The high, like if you divide that in half, the highest is 22 kilohertz. But this is like we're oversampling because we're doing, this is a process that you do on just the highs. So you want to have oversampling on your EQs, and that's basically gonna temporarily up the sample rate inside of the EQ for its processing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a big scoop out of the mids. You can kind of play with this curve later, but I'm just going to show you the principle of how the thing works. So the idea basically is to take just the highs and then apply some kind of saturation or distortion to it. I'm going to use the saturator, but you can use overdrive, you can use a lot of things. So let's just put that in there, and then I'm going to put it on, actually analog clip is probably fine. And then I'm going to put like 6 dB up and then 6 dB down here. And then let's do it on just the drums. Okay, so now check it out. Now when I turn this send up, right, what it's going to do is send some of the signal in parallel from the channel, which is, or I'll label this drums. And it's going to send some of the signal in parallel to the exciter, and then it's going to apply just a little bit of saturation just to the high end, and then we're going to mix that in. So check it out. this is what it's adding, right? And then you can kind of EQ it and get it exactly how you want it. And then if you play with this, like here, let's put it up to 12, and then minus 12 over here. You can also bring the gain up. Right, so that's what it's doing. Now, if you want to make super sure that it has no low end, you can do that with one of these four-pole high passes. But it's a great way to add some sizzle to your highs. So this is without. I'll take this off. This is without. And then bring it up. Right, and it'll bring a little bit of brightness into the highs. So it's adding. There's other ways to do it too. Some people like to do it with the saturator first. It gives you a little bit of a different tone, because then your saturation is based on the whole signal as opposed to just saturating the highs. Slightly different tone. Right? So you can use this send now to balance any channels that you want extra highs on. So let's see this. Let's find another channel that has a lot of stuff happening. These beeps and shit. Or like here. Alright, cool. So now I'm going to open it up a little. Sometimes you can compress it too. So I'm going to bring a compressor in. And if you want it to be prickly, you turn the attack up on the compressor, and that gives it a little bit of time before the compressor comes in. There, so you can really hear what it's doing now. I've kind of overdone it a bit so you can hear what's going on. So now I'll take the exciter off. And then I'll show you, yeah, now you can hear it a little better with the compressor. I'll put the saturator first. See, it's a little noisier with the saturator first. But yeah, and then you can just play with this EQ curve. That's like your main kind of thing that you play with to get it nice. Yeah. So it's just adding this real brightness into the mix. I like to do it like this though, with the EQ first and then saturator. Right? But yeah, so that helps you to balance the whole mix. And you can put like a little bit on the kicks, a little bit on your bass sound, a little bit on your vocal, etc., etc., etc. And the great thing about this, right, is if you look at this EQ, I'm not actually boosting in the EQ anywhere, because like the natural tendency when your sound doesn't have enough highs is to reach for an EQ and then crank the highs up. And if you crank the highs up on an EQ, most digital EQs sound really bad when you boost up the highs like that. Whereas, if you use an analog modeled EQ, you can kind of get away with boosting the highs. But this technique with the exciter, where you isolate just the highs and then saturate and compress, that gives you a much like your audio doesn't sound as stressed out. It sounds it's a bit too much if you just start like peaking the EQs. And then also you can kind of like, you can ruin your signal in other ways if you're just like, you keep trying to add it. Whereas this way, you still have the nice dry signal here, right? but like this is dry. So like the main kind of dynamic and everything is gonna stay, and then this exciter, like you see, it adds like a ton of brightness to the mix. See how it sounds all muffled without it? And then you can just balance the sends when you want, like, let's say one sound has more presence than another. Okay, so here, what do we got here? We got drums, we got bass, we got beeps. I just grabbed some random stems to show you this on. These were not the final stems for whatever track this was. But I was just grabbing some random bits here just so you can get the idea, because it's kind of like it's a cumulative effect. Now, a word of caution when you're doing this, it is sometimes, oh, hang on, did I break my drums out separate? Yeah, a word of caution when you're doing this, it's sometimes you can end up with some problems, like if you're, you can end up with some problems if you're grouping, because like, let's say, here, I'll take all these percussion parts and put them up in a group, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so, take this kick and this snare up here. So let's say we've got our kicks and our snares and our fills. I'll see kicks, snares, kick, snares, fills, hand drums. Crash is a drum. Yeah, I think I gotta mute this drum stuff. Yeah, that was the whole mix on the whole drum section, so I'll just kill that. Crash was part of the drum section. Okay, so let's say these are all in a group, right? And I group these into the drums. Let's say these all have the exciter up, and then over here I maybe put like a filter, right? Watch what happens. I'll solo the drum group. Watch what happens when I filter it down. Right, so this, here, I'll put these hand drums. So you see how the exciter is still coming through even though the whole drum group is filtered. So you got to kind of be aware of that. And if you're in that sort of a situation, you might end up wanting to have an exciter that is able to be used as an insert. Because this is like the exciter send, and this is great for balancing the highs on the whole mix. But if you just want to, like if you're in a situation where you're using drums, here I'll call this drum group, right? You might not necessarily want to put the exciter on the whole drum group. I mean, often you do, and I often do because it kind of gives it like a unified sound. So you could just go like this and turn this up, and then see that doesn't have that problem, and then it's drums as a group. So you still get that nice kind of like you're still getting that nice effect where it's like grouping them together and brightening them. But let's say you didn't want to, like you wanted to have an exciter on all of the drums except for the kick, right? Then you would have to use inserts for your exciter if you want to retain your grouping. So to do that, it's quite simple. You just take these three devices, put them into a group, and then make a wet dry. So you call this excited, right? So I'm going to call this exciter insert. Oops. Or I'll call this exciter bus, right? And then let's say that I wanted to have it as an insert on each channel individually. So if I bring this over to the snares, now I'm going to go create chain, and this one's going to be dry, right? And then this will be exciter insert. Okay, and then you just macro that, and then if I want to run it as an insert, then I can just bring the volume of the exciter up here, right? And then that way, because it's not that costly a chain, right? Like just a compressor, a saturator, and an EQ is not really that much that processor intensive. In fact, the whole thing is, yeah, it's still only introducing 20 milliseconds of latency, which is being introduced by the saturator a little bit, and I think the upsampled EQ a little bit. Yeah, if you take the EQ off of oversampling, That brings it down to 0 samples of latency. You can see at the bottom left of the screen that tells you how much latency each plugin is causing. So turning it to oversampling is adding a bit. The saturator, I have them default to high quality mode, but if I take the saturator off of high quality mode and I take this EQ off of oversampling, now if I go on the whole bus, the latency is 0 samples. So you can make it like 0 samples. That might be better for the insert, to be honest. But yeah, so anyway, if you had these little exciter inserts, you could put them on each channel and, you know, have your whole overall latency not really be that affected. And then you can have kind of precise control over each individual one, which is nice, and it's nice to have the individual control, but the exciter bus, it kind of glues the whole mix together in this really pleasing way that I do really like when I'm doing mix downs. And, you know, I mean, I used to do it on every single track. I don't do it on every single track now, but it's really nice on a mix down. It kind of provides a bit of glue and a bit of cohesion through the whole mix. So you can do it as an insert. You can also do it as a send. But either way, it adds a little bit of, you know, kind of brightness and balance to the highs in the mix. So this is also very well used in combination with what I call the 3 extremes. And the 3 extremes are, here I'll do a super high pass. So that would be one extreme is highs only above like about there. Another extreme would be lows only about here, right? And then the third extreme is the utility with the width up to 200%. So you know, I always recommend testing all 3 extremes because these 3 extremes, they frame your mix, right? Like it's like, you know, your mix is only as big as the 3 extremes, like the very highs, the very lows, and the very edges. So if you give this mix down the 3 extremes test with and without the exciter, here I'll turn this. Right. So listen to just the highs. And then you'll be able to hear just how much brightness. Like that's really adding a lot to the highs. Another thing that you can do when you're making exciters too is you can put it into mid-side mode here on the EQ. And if you put it into mid-side mode, you can you know, get different curves for the mid and the sides. So sometimes, like maybe, let's say you just wanted to excite the sides, you could take the mids and bring that down. Then that would just excite the wide signal. So that's another thing you can do. But really, your main thing is going to be playing with the curve on your EQ. I'll just put that back into stereo mode. The main thing is going to be playing with your curve on the EQ, playing with different distortion types, and then playing with either having it as a send that you're using to kind of balance the highs across your whole mix, or deciding to use it as an insert. So those are kind of some of the different ways that you can use exciters. It's a really, really good way to get that crispiness in your mix up in the highs. You can definitely overdo it, so watch out. Also, especially, it's good to know that this area in the frequencies, right around here, 3.4 kilohertz, that's like the super pain zone. So if you have like a lot going on in there, that can really make your mix harsh. So sometimes you can, if you feel it's appropriate, put a little dip around 3.4 kilohertz. It's just right there. Yeah, you can see when I'm mousing using this point, if you look at the bottom left of this display, you'll see what frequency it is, what note it is, etc. So sometimes it's nice to have a little dip around there just so you don't blow out the pain zone with the exciter, because you can definitely do that. Sometimes you might not want it to go all the way up too, so you can sometimes have a low pass as well. But yeah, so anyway, that's some of the stuff you can do with exciters. So try it with different EQs. try it with different curves on the EQ, try it with different saturators. The overdrive is really good. Like here, I'll show you kind of some of the difference between an overdrive. Like that provides a bit of a different tone than this. Actually, this overdrive's a little harsh though. It's louder. But yeah, so the overdrive, you get a bit more of a percussive tone with the overdrive. Saturator is often better for, like, you know, if you want to bring some highs up on your basses or whatever. So play with different distortion types. Play with the different curves on the EQ, and then play with having it on a bus or on an insert, and I'm sure you'll be able to get a good result. But yeah, just remember, there's, you know, do not boost your EQs when you want more highs. Use exciters or other forms of parallel processing to add highs, because if you boost your EQs really hard, it can sound harsh and phasey. Okay, so let's see if we got any questions here. Yep, no questions there. I'll go check on YouTube, see if anybody has any questions. And then I think that'll be it for the weekly download. I'm going to do another one tomorrow now that I have a home base here. Cool. All right, sweet. So yeah, that is the weekly download for this week. Okay, so lots of love, everybody. Enjoy using the exciter, and yeah, I will see you soon. Do another weekly download tomorrow. Peace.